to Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global on Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. Osun Election Petition Tribunal to deliver judgment on the July 16 governorship election on Friday. Ukraine government dismisses 5 regional governors in the biggest government shakeup since Russian invasion. Man kills 7 former co-workers in the United States of California, the second mass shooting in the state in less than a week. My name is Okpayemuni. We're beginning in Osun State as the Osun Governorship Election Petition Tribunal will on Friday, January 27, 2023, deliver judgment in the suit filed by former Governor Adegboyega Oyetola challenging the election of Governor Ademola Adeleke. It will be recalled that the All Progressives Congress, APC, and its candidate Oyetola had dragged People's Democratic Party, PDP, and its candidate Senator Adeleke to the tribunal, having been defeated in the July 16, 2022 gubernatorial election. The secretary to the tribunal, David Mike, confirmed the development in a notice sent to the parties. The 3-man panel led by Justice Sese Kume at 2 weeks ago entertained the final addresses of counsels to the plaintiff, the first respondent, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, second respondent, People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the third respondent, Governor Ademola Adeleke. According to Nigeria's electoral laws, the verdict of the tribunal may be challenged up to the Supreme Court. President Muhammadu Buhari has asked the Senate to confirm a former Inspector General of Police, Solomon Arase, as the chairman of the Police Service Commission. President Buhari's request was contained in a letter read by Senate President Ahmad Lawan on the floor of the Upper Legislative Chamber today. Mr. Arase, the 18th IGP, retired as the head of the Nigeria Police about a year after President Buhari assumed office. The former IGP was appointed by former President Goodluck Jonathan. In a separate letter, President Buhari asked the Upper Legislative Chamber to confirm the reappointment of Mahmood Isa as Resident Electoral Commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in Kebbi, and the new appointment of Sani Ali for the same position in Ondo State. Many Nigerians have continued to feel the adverse effect of a recurrent fuel scarcity alongside high prices, with long queues increasingly becoming a daily occurrence. Many motorists are faced with the challenges of having to queue for hours, losing quality time. Olayinka Ali was on the streets of Osogbo, the Osun State capital, and files in this report.
More than 3 months after scarcity of premium motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol, emerged in many parts of the country, attributable to alleged increase in ex-depot price, debt, and logistic challenges, the situation appears to be getting worse, with many Nigerians buying the product at the black market or waiting endlessly in prolonged queues for the product at the regulated price. With the commodity selling as high as 270 naira at a pump in many retail stations owned by independent marketers, consumers have questioned the rationale and loud silence of the sole importer, the Nigeria National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPC, and the regulator, Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA. Motorists who cannot stand the long hours spent on the queues have had to resort to the black market, with an impact on transportation costs. While there have been promises as regards the situation, Nigerians will need to power their homes and businesses using generators, as well as many motorists have yet to see an improvement in the supply of the product across the country. Cross-section of transport workers like Miriam Mohammed, Tijani Afiz, and Mustafa Musbao, in their separate interviews, all lamented on this lingering fuel scarcity and pleaded with the federal government to find a lasting solution.
We used to come, even I left home to 6 because I stay at Owode, so I left home to 6. I get there exactly maybe 10 minutes after 7. So we have been staying, we have been waiting.
Fuel is scarce, so most of them said this fuel is 300 naira per liter, is 180. Please, I beg all the government, help me So help all the some people, so they suffer.
The only thing that I can say that the government should help us for the fuel to be they should help us for the price of the fuel to come down, and again they supply us with fuel. That's the only thing I can have for the government.
Already, the impact has been felt in the rising cost of transportation, services, and dwindling household incomes. Commuters have witnessed at least 200% hike in the cost of transportation. Similarly, the traffic created as a result of the fuel queues continues to impact productivity, as many people now spend more hours on the road. Despite scarcity, the federal government has set aside 3.36 trillion naira for fuel subsidy from January to June in the 2023 budget, having spent well over 4 trillion naira on subsidizing the products last year. However, the chairman, Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, IPMAN, Oyo and Osun State Chapter, Alhaji Bukola Mutiu, has appealed to the residents of Osun State that the fuel scarcity being experienced was not emanated from IPMAN. He thereafter advised citizens to keep appealing to the federal government so as to get a soothing experience.
Well, it's because of lack of supply from NNPC. And the law of supply is that when the demand is higher than the supply, we have that kind of situation we find ourselves. We cannot continue this way, because the reason why we could not continue this way is that increase in pump price, it will affect all commodities, which I'm paying through my nose. You are paying through your nose because of the increase in prices of petroleum products. So government should come to our aid to do the needful. They should give us direct access to buy from NNPC. All these prices will crash down and you buy it at a normal official rate. I want to appeal to the masses that the situation on ground is not emanated from IPMAN, that is the station's owner. It's the situation that is beyond us that we find ourselves. And as important as we are in the economy of this country, we cannot just say we want to close down our station. We should help us to appeal to the government to do the needful.
Meanwhile, on January 17, 2023, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, stated that the federal government at some point had to borrow funds to buy petrol. Olayinka Ali, Western Spring Television News.
The Osun State government insists it did not sack any of the 1,500 newly recruited teachers who were recently displaced by the executive order enacted by Governor Ademola Adeleke, but says the teachers are not employees of the government. Chairman, State Staff Audit, Appointment and Promotion Review Committee, Dr. Muyiwa Oladimeji, made this known while appearing on Morning Spring, a Western Spring Television current affairs program. Dr. Oladimeji argued that even though the committee was yet to submit its report, it stands to reason that in line with Governor Ademola Adeleke's executive order, all appointments after July 16th returned to their initial positions. But one of the teachers, Olalekan Adewale, who spoke on behalf of his colleagues, asked the state government to not politicize the situation and ensure that those whose appointments follow due process are retained. Yesterday, the newly recruited teachers in Osun State appealed to the governor to allow them to continue to work in their various places of assignment.
It's not a question one will answer yes or no, because you have to look at it in its multifactorial sense. The teachers, just like many other new appointments, you will remember that when the governor took over during his inaugural speech, he said status every appointment after the election, status quo ante, that they should go to the previous appointment. So that interpreter, that means if you were just promoted a principal and you were a vice principal before, then go back to vice principal. And if you are a chief executive suddenly after that announcement, and before that you are not chief executive, then you go back to not being chief executive, status quo ante. So you can interpret, if you were not in the service of government as of the time the announcement was made, then of course it puts you in a very dicey situation. But notwithstanding that, when the teachers, when we came over, we're not in the business of wanting to sack anybody. Because we understand, one, everybody needs a livelihood. Two, the functions that they're supposed to give are very useful and germane to society. But after that, there are also very serious implications.
That is untrue. We are neither belong to any political party, and the recruitment was done without any political coloration, affiliation. We don't know anybody. All we know that we are professional teachers. They should count us out from any political gimmicks. We are professional teachers, and we are already fully captured. All the documentation has been done, including the capturing. We have state code. State code has been issued to us. So we were even expecting salary before the expiration of Governor Gboyega Oyetola.
Africa, Cameroon's government says it has not asked any country to mediate its conflict with Anglophone separatists, denying a statement from Canada that it had been assigned to work on a peace process. In a statement yesterday, the Cameroonian government said it had not entrusted any foreign country or external entity with any role of mediator or facilitator to settle the crisis. On January 21, Canada's foreign ministry said it had accepted a mandate to facilitate a peace process between Cameroonian authorities and some separatist factions in English-speaking regions to resolve a conflict that has gone on since 2017. A spokesperson for the Anglophone separatists who are trying to form a breakaway state called Ambazonia in the country's minority English-speaking region said they had taken note of the government's latest statement but would not comment further. There was no immediate comment by Canada's foreign ministry. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is visiting South Africa on the latest stage of a three-nation African tour aimed at boosting U.S. influence. The tour, which also included Senegal and Zambia, comes as Washington faces growing competition in the region with Russia and China. South Africa has recently taken over the chair of the BRICS economic group, made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which was set up as a counterweight to U.S. global dominance. While in South Africa, Ms. Yellen is expected to push President Cyril Ramaphosa to pursue plans for a gradual transition away from a heavy reliance on coal to cleaner energy. To the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine's government has dismissed 5 regional governors and an array of other senior officials in the biggest shakeup of the country's political leadership since Russia launched its invasion in February. Among more than a dozen senior Ukrainian officials who have resigned or were dismissed were the governors of Kyiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions. All 5 regions have witnessed major fighting over the past year, giving the governors an unusually high national profile. A deputy defense minister, a deputy prosecutor, a deputy head of Zelensky's office, and 2 deputy ministers responsible for regional development were among the other officials to leave their posts. North Atlantic Treaty Organization Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he's confident the transatlantic military alliance will find a solution soon on the delivery of battle tanks to Ukraine. Mr. Stoltenberg made this known after meeting with Germany's new defense minister Boris Pistorius, stating that at this pivotal moment in the war, Ukraine needs heavier and more advanced systems. The Secretary General said the both discussed the issue of battle tanks, adding that consultations among allies will continue, and it was confident a solution will be reached soon. The United Kingdom, a NATO member, has already pledged to deliver more than a dozen of its Challenger 2 tanks to Kiev, while pressure is mounting on Germany, a fellow ally, to allow deliveries of its own Leopard 2S.
I'm confident that there will be a solution soon, and I welcome also the clear message from the minister that other allies, other NATO allies that have Leopard battle tanks are of course free to identify those Leopard battle tanks that may be available for Ukraine, to make them ready, but also to start training of Ukrainian crews for those battle tanks. Because after the decision has been taken on delivery of battle tanks, it will take some time to identify, to make ready, and to train Ukraine.
The new Russian general in charge of operations in Ukraine said military reforms will respond to NATO's possible expansion on the collective West. In his first public comments, Valery Gerasimov, chief of Russia's military general staff, admitted problems with mobilizing troops and broader challenges in the conflict that began 11 months ago. Ms. Gerasimov told the news agency that the system of mobilization training in Russia was not fully adapted to the modern economic, promising to fix everything on the go. One military reforms announced mid-January could be adjusted to respond to security threats. He added that such threats include the aspirations of the North Atlantic Alliance to expand to Finland and Sweden, as well as the use of Ukraine as a tool for waging a hybrid war against Russia. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned Sweden that it should not accept its backing to join NATO following the burning of the Quran outside Ankara's embassy in Stockholm during the protest. Mr. Erdogan, in his first official response to the act by a far-right politician during the protest on the weekend that was approved by the Swedish police, said those who allow such blasphemy in front of its embassy should not expect its support for their NATO membership. Turkey and Hungary are the only NATO members not to have ratified the Nordic neighbors' historic decision to break their tradition of military non-alignment in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has promised that his parliament would approve the two bids next month. You are watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
Turn it up! It's the Wild Wild West, and Western Spring Television is pulling out all the stops to make sure that you don't miss out on every of the fun and happenings around you. Yup, we've got you covered because your girl got all the juiciest tidbits and entertainment news from around the world. Cross over to the chocolatey side of entertainment. Join me, Chocolate Cassie, on Eccentric as we take you into every bit of the juiciest news, fashion, music, movie updates, and other trending conversations. Together on the show, we'll get personal with your favorite celebrities via phone call, Zoom, or even live here in the studio. Eccentric will be showing on your TV screen on Western Spring Television, channel 190, only on Star Times.
Welcome back on Spring Global on Western Spring Television. The U.S. state of California is reeling from its second mass shooting in days after a man shot dead 7 former co-workers south of San Francisco. The attacks took place in the coastal city of Half Moon Bay, and the victims were all Chinese-American farm workers. San Mateo County Sheriff Christina Coppers said the suspect, Zhao Shunli, who is 67-year-old, was arrested after driving to a police station. It comes as the state mourns the death of 11 at Monterey Park, about 6 hours southeast of Half Moon Bay, during Luna, near Lunar New Year celebrations. California Governor Gavin Newsom tweeted that he was at a hospital meeting with victims of the earlier mass shooting when he was pulled away to be briefed about the second attack, describing it as tragedy upon tragedy.
Zhao was taken into custody without incident, and a semi-automatic handgun was located in his vehicle. Zhao is believed to have acted alone, and there is no further threat to this community. This is a devastating tragedy for this community and the families touched by this unspeakable act of violence.
In the United Kingdom, Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says it is disappointing that politicians have failed to resolve the challenges facing the social care sector in the United Kingdom. Speaking to Sky News, Welby described the issue of how to plug the gap in social care funding as one of the most fundamental questions affecting the country morally and ethically. The Archbishop said he believes the rate of tax all individuals pay must be increased to cover rising costs in the social care sector. He said increased funds are going to have to come from taxation, but stressed that it has to be seen to be just and fair to meet the values the society wants.
It is going to have to come from taxation, which means from all of us. But there is going to have to be responsibility for individuals, but it has to be seen to be just and fair and to meet the values we want as a society. It's no use saying we can do it on the cheap, because we can't. It's always going to be a mix, and if we go back to some of the past examinations of this, there's a cap on the suggestion of a cap on what should be spent by individuals. Those weren't done by the church, but there's been a lot of thought going into this. But as you say, it may sound like motherhood and apple pie, but at least apple pie is eaten. The motherhood and apple pie, as you call it, of the report repeats and develops themes that have been there for over 20 years, not in any one party, but have never been implemented.
In the Middle East, the Kuwaiti government has resigned barely 3 months after its formation in the latest political standoff in the Gulf country. Prime Minister Sheikh Ahmad Nawaf al-Sabah submitted the resignation of his cabinet to the country's crown prince yesterday. Crown Prince Sheikh Mashal al-Ahmad al-Sabah was taking over most of the emir's duties last year, named Sheikh Ahmad as premier and called early legislative polls after dissolving the previous parliament to end feuding that impeded fiscal reforms. Tensions recently resurfaced between Kuwait's elected parliament and the government sworn in last October as lawmakers pressed for a debt relief bill under which the state would buy Kuwaiti citizens' personal loans. It was gathered that the Prime Minister submitted the government's resignation to the Crown Prince as a result of what has become of the relationship between the executive and legislative authorities. In South America, Brazil has airlifted 16 starving Yanomami tribal people to receive urgent treatment after the government declared a medical emergency. The indigenous people live in a reserve in Brazil's northern state of Roraima. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has accused his predecessor, Jair Bolsonaro, of committing genocide against the rainforest tribe. The government declared a medical emergency after hundreds of Yanomami children died from malnutrition. The deaths are linked to water pollution caused by mining and logging in the densely forested area, where food insecurity is rife. On Saturday, President Lula visited Roraima, which borders Venezuela and Guyana, following reports of severe malnutrition amongst Yanomami children, and said he was shocked by what he found. Route police have used tear gas to disperse anti-government protesters in the Peruvian capital as demonstrations that have been gripping the country since early December show no sign of abating. Several hundred protesters marched late yesterday in central Lima to demand the removal of President Dina Boluarte. At least 46 people have died since violent protests started early last month, following the removal of left-wing indigenous President Pedro Castillo. Interior Minister Vicente Romero, in an interview, said there are indications that protests will continue, adding that the ministry is working intensively with the Defense Ministry to resolve them. The judge investigating the 2020 Beirut port explosion has charged Lebanon's then Prime Minister Hassan Diab and 2 other former ministers with homicide with probable intent. According to a court summons, all the top officials, including the country's public prosecutor and the head of the Domestic Intelligence Agency, were also charged in connection with the blast. Judge Tarek Bitta, who has unexpectedly resumed an inquiry that has been paralyzed by high-level political resistance, has scheduled questioning with Prosecutor General Gassam awaited for February. However, the Public Prosecutor's Office has disputed Bitta's authority to issue the charges. Bitta's efforts to interrogate top officials over the explosion, which killed at least 218 people and shattered parts of Beirut, have been hindered by factions including heavily armed Iran-backed Hezbollah. In business, the Policy Setting Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has raised the monetary policy rate, which measures interest rate, from 16.5% to 17.5% to rein in inflation. In December, Nigeria's inflation rate fell slightly from 21.47% to 21.34%. The governor of the Apex Bank, Godwin Emefiele, announced the development to journalists today after the committee's meeting at the CBN headquarters in Abuja. Mr. Emefiele said the MPC was of the view that although inflation rate moderated marginally in December, the economy remains confronted with the risk of high inflation with adverse consequences on the general standard of living. Speaking on the January 31st deadline for the phasing out of old Naira notes, the CBN governor insisted that the date remains sacrosanct. He also said the time given for the deposit of old Naira notes was enough for Nigerians to go to commercial banks and get new notes. Meanwhile, the Senate and House of Representatives have asked the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, to extend the deadline for the withdrawal of old Naira notes from circulation.
He says reports suggest that many people want the deadline to be shifted for reasons ranging from their inability to gain access to the new notes or deposit their old currencies. I must say here that unfortunately I don't have good news for those who feel that we should shift the deadline. My apologies. The reason is because, just like the president had said on more than 2 occasions, and even to people privately, that for us 90 days, in fact, we feel is 100 days is enough for anybody who has money or the old currency to deposit the money in the banks. And we took every measure to ensure that all the banks were open or remain still open to receive all old currencies. 100 days, we believe, is more than adequate.
And now to tennis, Stefanos Tsitsipas defeated Jiří Lecheka in straight sets today to set up an Australian Open semi-final with Karen Khachanov. Greek third seed Tsitsipas reached his 4th Melbourne semi-final in 5 years with a 6-3, 7-6, 6-4 win. Lecheka of the Czech Republic had been one of the surprise packages of the tournament, having beaten 2 top 12 seeds to make the quarterfinals. The 21-year-old had previously never won a Grand Slam match.
Tonight got him the win in straight sets. He does it 6-3, 7-6, 6-4 in 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Before we end Spring Global, here's a recap of our top stories. The Osun Governorship Election Petition Tribunal will on Friday, January 27, 2023, deliver judgment in the suit filed by former Governor Adewale Oyetola challenging the election of Governor Ademola Adeleke. Ukraine's government has dismissed 5 regional governors and an array of other senior officials in the biggest shakeup of the country's political leadership since Russia launched its invasion in February. The U.S. state of California is reeling from its second mass shooting in days after a man shot dead 7 former co-workers south of San Francisco. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Okoye Muni. Thanks for watching.